Good morning, friends. So excited to be on this Acts series with you all. We're going to dive into Acts 23 today, and we're really going to land on verse 11. There's several different directions that we can go, but verse 11, when the Lord spoke, that's what we're going to talk about today. Paul was in prison because he was preaching the gospel. His confident obedience put him in chains, but his testimony, it was captivating the crowds. There was an issue, though, with how he used certain words. So in one crowd, it was the word Gentiles, and there was an uproar. They chained him up, they stretched him out, and were ready to flog him. And the centurions came in to, make sure that everything was fine, got him in, and they wanted to question more about why he was about to get flogged. And then he was in the room with the chief priests, the Sadducees, the Pharisees, and he said the word resurrection. And that once again flew the crowd into an uproar, and it confused the entire room to where Paul was once again rescued by the Roman soldiers and brought in because they feared that they might rip his body apart. So within a few moments here, a few hours here, Paul was rescued 2 different times from flogging and possibly a ripping apart of his body because of his preaching the gospel. So he was in this situation because of confident obedience of what God did for him on that road to Damascus, right? So in verse 11, Paul was in the barracks and the Lord changed everything. It says, the following night, the Lord stood near Paul and said, "Take courage. As you have testified about me in Jerusalem, so you must also testify in Rome." I want to land on take courage. In this specific verse, take courage, it speaks of personal bravery. It talks about being alert physically and mentally. Ecclesiastes 11:9 says to take courage in your heart, in your eyes, and what you see, and your walk. This courage also speaks to confidence, to be bold. It's the type of confidence that they talked about in 2 Corinthians 5 verses 6 through 8. To be bold and confident. So insert your name here. I'm going to say Jade. Be confident, bold, alert in your heart, in what you see, and in how you walk. Where in your life do you need to take courage today? But let's not just land there, because the provision of deliverance from that situation for Paul was also said in that verse. But before we acknowledge that, I want to talk about Jesus also acknowledged the good work about testifying his name. Paul did a hard thing, preaching to a people group who didn't want to hear him, but more than that, he obeyed. Obedience is not always easy, but it is required. There are a million things that are going to come our way to distract us, to derail us, to make us think that this is it. But we have to and we must take courage and fight the good fight of faith to fulfill our purpose that the Lord has for us. The book of Hebrews is filled with faith-filled stories to encourage us, to remind us to take courage, because sometimes we do not live by what we see, but it is by faith to get where God is taking us. The journey that we're on, it is not for the faint of heart. We have to be strong and very courageous, but not fear, because the Lord is with us. The last half of verse 11, it says, "So you must also testify in Rome." When the Lord spoke this to Paul, Paul had no idea that there was a plot being formed against him. There were about 40 or more men that had planned to not eat or drink anything until Paul was killed. And they had schemed this with the chief priests. And so what happened is Paul's nephew heard of this, went and told Paul, who was in prison, and then was told by Paul to tell a soldier, and then that soldier said, go to the commander. So all of these people intricately woven into this great deliverance of Paul going and testifying to Rome. Don't you know that the Lord wants to use you too? You have no idea why you are in some situations that you're in, or why you hear certain things, but you could very well be the one instrument to continue the movement of somebody declaring the good news to somebody else. You just never know. This is where our faith is activated. So from Paul's nephew to a centurion to a commander, the Lord used all of these people to get him to Rome and transported him there like in complete safety. Let me tell you how safe he was. It was no small crowd. That commander ordered 200 soldiers, 70 horsemen, and 200 spearmen. I don't think one really hungry or thirsty man would have put themselves up against that group of people. I just don't think it would have happened. So the plot against Paul was exposed. When the cavalry arrived to Caesarea, the governor read the letter that the commander wrote, and in that letter, the commander said that Paul was innocent. In verse 29, it says that I found the accusation had to do with questions about their law, but there was no charge against him that deserved death or imprisonment. Paul was about to be flogged. Paul was about to be ripped apart. And this soldier said, I don't see that there was anything that he was doing that deserved death or imprisonment. So there's his innocence. The Lord spoke to Paul. The plot against Paul was exposed, and he was safely escorted to Herod's palace in Caesarea. How ironic that the building that Paul was placed in for protection was built by the evil man who murdered the infant boys of Bethlehem. God truly turns things that the enemy intends for evil for good. The one thing that I want us to meditate on and take away from this chapter is that one word from God makes all the difference. Just like I said earlier, you may be a nephew in somebody else's story, or a centurion, a soldier who reports the story that it actually is to bring somebody to a new place. You might be a reason for somebody to remember to take courage today. So are you in a place where you can listen and have confident obedience in speaking about the Lord and what He's done in your life to explain that to people that you're in and the world that you're in? Are you in a place where you can receive it? I know that the world that we are in now, the condition of it is tough. It is hard. There are hard and calloused hearts, and there are deaf ears, but there is still a God who says, take courage. The Lord is with you. Have a great day, friends.